Welcome, listeners, to the Sleepy Storyteller channel. I'm Silas, your sleepy storyteller, pulling you down the rabbit hole of time, one slow step at a time. If you like listening to these videos, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe with notifications on so you can continue your sleepy journey through history. Also, please comment the city you live in and the time it is where you are. It's always great to see where you all embark on your sleepy journey from. Now, take a moment to find a comfortable resting position. Close your eyes gently, and in your own time, allow yourself to sink into the quiet atmosphere of the past as we begin our slow journey together. Tonight, we're stepping back to the 1865s to embark on a quiet walk through Richmond after the Great Fire. I enter the city of Richmond with slow and careful steps. The fire has passed, but the memory of it hangs heavy in the air. The streets seem to breathe in silence, as though the city itself is holding its breath, stunned by what has been lost. The smell of smoke lingers everywhere, sharp and acrid, yet strangely sweet, as if the wood and stone remember the flames. The air is thick, heavy in my chest, and each breath carries the memory of what has been burned. Ash drifts downward in soft spirals, falling gently from the sky like a strange and sorrowful snow. It settles on rooftops, on the broken edges of windows, and on the ground where I walk, marking every step in pale gray dust. The city is subdued now. Only days ago, it had been filled with panic. Residents fleeing, soldiers marching, flames leaping from one roof to another. Now, there is only stillness. A silence after chaos. A hush that feels both unnatural and sacred. I pause to take in the scene before me. To my left stands a row of blackened buildings, their frames hollow, their windows shattered. The fire has stripped them of their purpose, leaving only the skeletons behind. Brick walls lean against one another like weary men, exhausted by the burden they carried. Wooden beams stretch out at broken angles, charred and jagged, pointing accusingly toward the sky. I move slowly down the street, my footsteps soft against the carpet of ash. Once, this road would have been crowded, wagons rolling, horses pulling, merchants calling out from their shops, and children chasing one another in laughter. I try to imagine those sounds filling the air again, but it is difficult. The silence here is absolute. The echoes of life have vanished, leaving only memory. The fire has not only burned buildings, it has etched sorrow into the very stones. Every step I take feels heavy, as though the ground itself remembers. In the stillness, I hear the faintest sounds. The creak of a roof beam settling under its own weight, the flutter of a bird's wings as it escapes the ruins, and the distant crackle of embers, still alive, hidden beneath the rubble. These small sounds feel louder in the silence, reminders that the fire has not entirely gone. I stop beside what must have once been a shop. The sign is gone. Nothing left but a charred plank hanging loosely by one nail. The windows are blackened, the glass shattered across the ground in fragments that glitter faintly in the pale light. Inside, All is shadow, except for a single overturned barrel that has somehow survived. I cannot help but wonder who worked here, who tended to customers day after day, and how quickly their livelihood was lost when the flames came. The sky above carries its own scars. The smoke has thinned, yet it has not fully cleared. The sun pushes weakly through a veil of gray, casting a light that is soft and muted, as though even the sky grieves for the city. The brightness of the day has been stolen, leaving behind a pale and washed-out glow. Shadows fall across the ruins in faded outlines, blurred at their edges, as if nothing here can quite hold its shape anymore. I walk further, and the silence deepens. It is not the gentle quiet of a calm morning. It is heavier than that, heavier than still water or unbroken snow. This is the silence after destruction, the silence that follows when voices have been silenced, when the noise of life has been replaced by the echo of loss. It feels like standing in the hollow of a great bell that has just been struck, the ringing still fading. For a moment, I close my eyes. I breathe in the smoke. I feel the weight of the ashes brushing against my skin, and I listen. Somewhere far away, I think I hear a faint cartwheel creaking, or perhaps it is only the sound of wood collapsing deeper into ruin. In this quiet, the line between memory and present blurs. I almost hear the city as it once was, alive and bustling, layered faintly over the ruined silence of now. Opening my eyes again, I see the ash drifting steadily, lazily. It settles on my shoulders, clinging to my coat, as though the city itself is asking me to carry its memory forward. Each step I take feels like a step into the past, through a place suspended between destruction and survival. I glance up toward the distant hills where some structures still stand untouched. From here, they look like guardians, watching silently over the ruins below. They too are marked by smoke, their walls darkened, but they endure. They remind me that not everything was lost, that even in ruin, a fragment of the city still remains upright, waiting. The fire has taken much, but the city still breathes. It is a shallow, painful breath, but it is there, faint and steady. In the ruins, there is sorrow, yes, but there is also endurance. As I continue forward, I remind myself that these ashes are not only a sign of death, but also the ground from which renewal may one day rise. And so, with slow steps, I keep walking deeper into Richmond, into its silence, into its smoke, into the heart of what the fire has left behind. The walk has just begun. The street stretches out before me, long and unnaturally bare. I walk slowly, listening to the sound of my own footsteps, echoing against stone and ash. Richmond's avenues were once the veins of the city, filled with wagons creaking under heavy loads, merchants calling to one another, the steady clop of horses carrying riders to and from their work. Now, those familiar rhythms are gone. The wide roads stand empty, like hollow shells of what they once were. Ash crunches softly under my boots as I make my way forward. Shards of glass glimmer faintly in the muted light, scattered across the ground like fragments of memory. They are sharp, but also strangely delicate. Jagged pieces of windows that once reflected shop signs, the faces of customers, the life of a city in motion. I stop for a moment, kneeling to look at one shard more closely. It catches the weak sunlight, a ghost of brightness in a place otherwise muted. For a brief moment, I can almost see the reflections it once held, before the fire turned it into nothing more than a broken sliver. The storefronts lining the street are hollow, blackened frames. Some lean forward, as if bowing under the weight of their own ruin. Wooden signs hang loose, scorched and unreadable, their painted letters erased by flame. One doorway gapes open, leading into a shell of a shop, where only the outlines of shelves remain. I step closer, careful on the uneven ground. The smell here is stronger, the lingering bitterness of burnt wood, mixed with the faint metallic scent of twisted iron. I imagine this shop as it might have been. Perhaps a grocer's, with sacks of flour piled neatly in rows, barrels of molasses at the back, the air filled with the faint sweetness of sugar and spice. I can almost hear the murmur of conversation, the shopkeeper greeting a customer, the sound of coins dropping into a till, a child's laughter at being given a piece of candy. Now, all of that is gone, replaced by stillness and the soft whisper of wind through broken beams. I step back into the street. Its emptiness is overwhelming. These roads, once crowded with carts and wagons, feel like vast empty plains. Without the noise of life, I can hear the smallest sounds, the scrape of my boot on stone, the hollow echo bouncing off ruined walls, the distant caw of a crow perched somewhere unseen. Each sound lingers, filling the emptiness only to fade quickly back into silence. I pass what was once a tavern. The building still stands, though its roof has collapsed inward. A single chair rests outside, charred but recognizable. I picture the evenings that once filled this place, the sound of fiddles playing, the low hum of voices, the clinking of mugs. Taverns were the gathering heart of a city, where strangers became friends and news traveled faster than any printed page. Now there is no music, no laughter, no news to share, only ruins. The silence presses in again, heavier with every step. Further along, I come across a street corner where the fire's touch seems lighter. A lamppost remains standing, its glass shattered, but the iron still firm. Beneath it lies a scattering of brick, charred but whole. I pause there, imagining the lamplighter making his rounds, touching flame to wick, bringing light to the city each evening. That small act of brightness once guided weary travelers, but tonight the lamp will remain dark, its post standing only as a relic of what was. Everywhere I look, I feel the weight of absence. It is not only the absence of people, it is the absence of sound, of color, of ordinary life. Each ruined wall reminds me not of destruction alone, but of what once filled these streets, the bustle of markets, the clatter of hooves, the ordinary rhythm of daily living. The fire has not only destroyed buildings, it has stolen the very heartbeat of Richmond. Yet, even in the silence, faint echoes seem to linger. I almost hear the voices of children playing in the distance, their laughter carried by imagination more than by air. I almost hear the whistle of a shopkeeper, the bark of a dog chasing a cart, the ring of a blacksmith's hammer. These echoes are not truly there, and yet they fill the space around me, as if the city itself remembers and longs to be whole again. I continue my walk, moving deeper down the hollow street. The air is heavy, but it carries with it a strange kind of stillness, an invitation to remember, to see not only the ruins before me, but the life that once animated them. The fire has hollowed the streets, but memory lingers in every stone, every shard of glass, every silent storefront. And so I walk on, slowly, carefully, listening to the silence and to the faint echoes of a city that once thrived, a city that still breathes in its quiet way, waiting for life to return. My steps carry me toward the heart of the city, where the great buildings of Richmond once stood in pride. These were not just structures of brick and mortar. They were symbols, monuments of a cause that had claimed this city as its capital. Now, they stand hollow, stripped of meaning, their grandeur reduced to ash and ruin. I come first to a row of government offices, their columns still upright, though blackened by fire. Their facades, once bright and imposing, are scarred now. The marble stained with soot, the windows shattered into dark, empty eyes. I pause before them, gazing up at what remains. These halls once echoed with voices of power, men debating policies, drafting orders, sending messages across a fractured nation. Now, they echo only with silence, their authority consumed by flames and by defeat. I walk slowly along their front steps. The stone beneath me is cracked, littered with fragments of roof tiles and fallen plaster. A charred desk lies toppled on the lawn, its drawers open, their contents long since turned to cinders. I imagine the frantic rush that must have filled these rooms in the final days, the hurried shuffling of papers, the weight of decisions, the panic of retreat. Then the fire came, sweeping through, erasing the traces of power as though to remind the city that even governments can fall. Further down, I pass the husk of a grand warehouse. Its walls are blackened, its roof collapsed inward, leaving only a cavernous shell. Inside, I see the skeletons of burned beams and the twisted remains of iron fittings. These warehouses once stored supplies for the Confederate Army, food, uniforms, ammunition, all the goods that fed a war. Now they are empty, consumed by the fire that was set to deny those supplies to Union forces. What once represented strength and preparation is now nothing more than smoldering ruin. I step closer, peering through a broken archway. The smell of smoke still lingers heavily here, sharper than in the open streets. I breathe it in, letting the history of this place settle in my chest. How many men relied on what was stored here? How many soldiers marched into battle with rifles and boots supplied by these very walls? And yet, in the end, all of it was reduced to ashes, scattered by a single night of flame. Walking on, I reach the burned shell of the Capitol building itself, standing atop its hill, overlooking the ruined streets below. It still rises with dignity, its shape familiar, though scarred. White columns stand tall against the gray sky, streaked with soot, but unbowed. The steps leading up are littered with ash, but I climb them slowly, each footfall heavy with memory. From this height, I can see much of the city spread out before me. The blackened grid of streets, the shells of buildings, the faint trails of smoke still rising in the distance. It is a sobering view. Once, from this very spot, leaders looked out over a thriving capital, confident in its purpose. Today, it is a city of ruins, and their cause has fallen with it. I stand quietly at the top, letting the silence speak. These landmarks, once heavy with authority, now feel strangely hollow. The fire did more than burn wood and stone. It burned away the illusion of permanence. Power, too, is fragile. What was once declared unshakable has been reduced to ash in a matter of hours. As I walk back down, I notice the faint traces of life returning. A soldier leans against a wall, his uniform dusty, his face weary. He watches the street without speaking, as if he too feels the weight of what has been lost. Across the way, two men sort through rubble, pulling bricks aside, perhaps salvaging what can still be used. Life persists, even here, among the ruins of power. The streets near the government buildings are quieter still, as though the silence deepens in reverence. I feel it pressing against me, not oppressive, but heavy with memory. Every column, every wall, every charred beam seems to whisper of the fall, not only of buildings, but of an entire dream once carried here. And yet, as I walk away, I notice something else. The buildings still stand, broken though they are. The columns still rise. The walls, though scarred, are not erased. The fire has stripped them of their meaning as symbols of power, but perhaps they will find a new meaning in time as symbols of survival. I take another slow breath of the smoke-tinged air. The ruins remind me that power can fall in an instant, but the city remains. Beneath the ash, life stirs, waiting for its moment to return. And so, I leave the burned landmarks behind, stepping back into the silence of the streets, carrying their lesson with me. I leave the hollow streets behind and make my way toward the James River. The sound reaches me before the sight, steady, soft, eternal. After so much silence in the city, the murmur of the river feels alive, like a quiet reminder that the world still moves forward, even after fire and ruin. As I step onto the riverbank, the air changes. It is cooler here, carrying the dampness of water rather than the sharp sting of smoke. The scent of ash still lingers faintly, drifting from the city behind me. But here it mixes with the earthy smell of mud and the faint sweetness of wild grass along the shore. I breathe more deeply, and for the first time in this walk, the air feels almost clean. The river itself flows calmly, its wide surface reflecting the pale light of the sky. The water moves as it always has, unhurried, steady, indifferent to the destruction that lies only a few streets away. Watching it, I feel the contrast sharply. The city lies in silence, its buildings scarred and broken, but the James flows on, unscathed, as though untouched by the fire that consumed so much of Richmond. I pause at the edge of the bank, letting my gaze follow the water downstream. For centuries, this river has carried life into the city. Flatboats and barges once moved along its surface, bringing flour, tobacco, and cotton to be traded in warehouses and markets. It was a river of prosperity, binding Richmond to the world beyond. But in these last years, the James carried more than commerce. It bore the heavy weight of war. I imagine the gunboats that once patrolled these waters, their iron hulls cutting through the current, cannons poised and ready. I picture the supply boats loaded with food and weapons, guarded carefully as they wound their way past the city's docks. The river that had once been a lifeline for merchants became a lifeline for soldiers. It carried not only goods, but also the hopes of a nation at war. And when the fire came, it carried away fragments of that final night, drifting charred debris downstream until it vanished into the distance. I stepped closer to the water's edge. A few blackened beams lie half submerged in the shallows, remnants of a dock that once stood here, now collapsed and broken. The timbers jut outward at odd angles, their surfaces scorched, their edges softened by water. They tell their own story, of flames that reached even here, of a city that burned right down to the river's edge. Yet still, the river flows past them, undisturbed. As I stand watching, a heron lifts itself from the reeds, its wings spreading wide and graceful as it takes flight across the water. The sight startles me at first, breaking the stillness, but then I feel a quiet comfort in it. Even amidst ruin, life continues. The bird does not pause to mourn the city's loss. It rises, it moves forward, just as the river does. I walk a little way along the bank, listening to the soft lap of water against stone. In the distance, I hear faint hammering, the sound of men beginning to rebuild, perhaps repairing docks, perhaps salvaging what remains of boats. Their work is slow but steady, like the river itself. It reminds me that though Richmond has been scarred, it is not lifeless. I pause again, looking out across the water. I think of those who once stood here before me, merchants unloading their wares, dockhands calling to one another as they hauled barrels ashore, families watching ships arrive with goods from distant cities. I also think of soldiers, their boots heavy with mud, their eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for supplies or reinforcements that never came quickly enough. The James has carried both prosperity and desperation, both laughter and sorrow. Now, it carries only its own reflection, a ribbon of calm winding through a city of ruin. Its constancy feels like a promise. Empires rise and fall, wars begin and end, fires consume, and yet the river remains, moving steadily toward the sea. It does not falter. It does not burn. It simply flows, carrying with it the memory of everything that has happened along its banks. I stand there for a long while, letting the sight and sound of the river settle into me. It soothes something deep within, offering balance to the grief of the streets I walked before. In its calmness, I sense resilience. Perhaps Richmond, too, will learn to flow again, steady and unbroken, even after the fire. At last, I turn back toward the city. The ruins wait, quiet and heavy with memory. But I carry the rhythm of the river with me now. Its steady murmur lingers in my ears as I step away from the bank, ready to continue my walk deeper into Richmond's silence. I leave the river behind and wander slowly into what was once a neighborhood where families lived, laughed, and built their lives together. The shift is immediate. The wide streets of commerce and power fade, giving way to narrower lanes lined with the remnants of homes. Yet here, too, the fire has left its mark. Charred chimneys rise like lonely sentinels, standing tall where houses have collapsed around them. They jut upward from the ruins, blackened and bare, the last vertical reminders of walls and roofs that once gave shelter. Some lean at uneasy angles, while others stand straight, stubborn in their defiance against the fire that consumed everything else. Each one feels like a gravestone, a memorial to the life that once filled these spaces. I walk carefully over broken stones and scattered timber. The smell of smoke lingers even here, though it is softer than in the city's center. Instead, what strikes me most is the quiet. These streets should be alive with the sounds of families, children running, neighbors talking across fences, the ring of hammers repairing roofs, the hum of evening suppers being prepared. But now there is nothing. The silence here is different from the silence of government halls or empty warehouses. This is a silence made of absence, the absence of voices, of laughter, of home. I pause before what remains of a small cottage. Its wooden frame is mostly gone, leaving only fragments of wall and the stone hearth where meals were once cooked. Scattered around the ruin are traces of everyday life. A cracked teapot lying on its side in the ashes, a child's doll with its face half burned, the rusted rim of a metal wash basin. These small things speak louder than the grand ruins of official buildings. They tell the story of families who fled in haste, carrying what they could, leaving behind what they could not. I kneel to touch the doll, careful not to disturb it too much. It is light, fragile, its fabric stiffened by soot. I imagine the child who once held it, perhaps clutching it tightly as they were hurried out the door, urged by parents to escape the approaching flames. Did they look back, one last time, at the home they were leaving? Did they know, even then, that it would not be standing when they returned? The thought lingers in me as I set the doll gently back where it lay. I move on, deeper into the neighborhood. The houses here stand in various states of ruin, some burned completely to their foundations, others partially standing, their walls gaping open to the sky. Through the hollow frames, I can see the remains of staircases that now lead nowhere, doors that open onto nothing but rubble. They are houses that no longer know how to be homes. As I walk, I find myself listening, as if expecting to hear the faint traces of what once was. I almost hear a mother's voice calling her children in for supper, the bark of a dog racing along the fence line, the creak of a rocking chair on a front porch. These sounds are not truly there, but my mind fills in the silence with echoes of life. The neighborhood remembers, and through its silence, I remember too. On one corner, I come across a garden wall still standing, its bricks scorched but upright. Inside the boundary, the fire has left only ashes, but a few stubborn plants cling to life near the edges, green shoots pushing through the gray. They seem almost defiant, fragile, yet persistent, reminders that not everything yields to destruction. I pause to watch them sway in the faint breeze. Their presence is small, but it is enough to remind me of the resilience hidden even here. As I continue, I pass the ruins of larger homes, once the residences of wealthier families. Their grandeur has not saved them from ruin. Grand staircases lie in splinters, fine windows shattered, parlors reduced to heaps of ash. Yet, scattered among the debris, I see fragments of refinement, a piece of porcelain, a gilded frame, the bent spine of a book. These details speak of comfort once enjoyed, now reduced to the same silence as the simplest of cottages. Fire does not distinguish between rich and poor. The further I walk, the more the silence presses in. But it is not a silence of despair. It is a silence of remembrance. These empty homes feel like they are holding space for the lives that fled, waiting patiently for their return. I imagine the families coming back, standing in shock before the ruins, but also gathering courage, speaking softly to one another of rebuilding. I take a slow breath, letting the weight of the neighborhood settle within me. These ruins are not just evidence of destruction. They are testimonies of lives lived, of meals shared, of love and loss. They remind me that history is not only written in grand halls or battlefields, but in the quiet corners of family homes. As I turn to leave, I look back at the row of broken chimneys silhouetted against the pale sky. They stand in silence, but they stand still. Like the people of Richmond, they endure. And so, I continue my walk, carrying with me the quiet remembrance of families who once filled these streets with life, and who, in time, may return to fill them again. As I move beyond the rows of broken chimneys and hollow homes, the silence begins to change. It is not gone, but woven into it are faint sounds that carry something new. At first, it is the rhythm of hammers, soft, uneven, yet persistent. Then, the murmur of voices, low but steady, rising from somewhere ahead. For so long, my walk has been among ruins and echoes of absence. But here, at last, I begin to hear signs of life. I follow the sound and soon see them. Townsfolk scattered among the rubble, bending low to lift bricks, to clear timber, to stack what can be salvaged. Their movements are slow, their shoulders heavy with fatigue, yet there is a kind of quiet determination in the way they work. Each stone shifted, each plank carried aside, is a gesture of resilience, a refusal to let the fire have the last word. I pause at a respectful distance, watching as two men pry apart the remains of a doorway, their faces smudged with soot, their hands raw from labor. Nearby, a woman sweeps the street with a makeshift broom, pushing aside dust and ash. Her motions are steady, almost rhythmic, as if the act of clearing the ground is as much for the spirit as for the place itself. She pauses once, leaning on her broom to catch her breath, then resumes without hesitation. Among the workers, I notice children. Their voices are faint at first, but unmistakable. Light, high-pitched, carrying in the stillness like a song. I follow the sound and find them playing on the edge of the ruins, their laughter mixing with the sigh of the wind. They have no toys but broken pieces of wood, no playground but the skeleton of a fallen wall, and yet they find joy enough to chase one another, weaving between stones and ash. Their laughter is not loud, but it is piercing. It cuts through the weight of silence that has lingered over the city, reminding me that life, even in the shadow of ruin, refuses to vanish. I walk slowly past them, letting the sound wash over me. It feels almost like hearing birdsong at the edge of winter, fragile, yet full of promise. Further along, I see a man kneeling in front of what was once his home. The structure is gone, but he is arranging the salvaged bricks into neat stacks, as though laying the foundation for something not yet built. His hands move with patience, one brick at a time, as though each piece carries memory and meaning. He does not speak, but the care with which he places each stone tells its own story. Of loss, yes, but also of the will to begin again. I stop near what looks like a small community gathering. A handful of townsfolk stand together in a half circle, speaking quietly. Some hold tools, others only carry the dust of labor on their clothes. Their faces are weary, lined with smoke and sorrow, but in their eyes there is a glimmer of resolve. One gestures to the remains of a street, speaking of what might be rebuilt there. Another nods, pointing to a pile of salvaged wood. The conversation is hushed, practical, but it is laced with hope. The first tender threads of a city stitching itself back together. As I stand listening, I feel something stir within me. For hours I have walked through silence, through ashes, through the weight of all that has been lost. But here, among these faint voices and steady hands, I sense the first stirrings of renewal. It is not loud nor swift. It is whispered, like a flame catching slowly, like embers that glow after the fire has passed. But it is there. I turn my gaze upward for a moment. The sky above Richmond is pale, almost washed clean of smoke now. In its stillness, it feels as though the city itself is drawing breath again, preparing for what comes next. The fire has left scars, but the people remain. And as long as they remain, there is the possibility of rebuilding, of remembering not only what was lost, but what may yet be made anew. As I continue my walk, I carry with me the sound of those hammers, the sweep of the broom, the faint laughter of children playing among ashes. They are small sounds, easy to overlook, but in their quiet way, they are louder than silence. They are the whispers of recovery, gentle, fragile, but insistent. And in those whispers, I hear the promise of a city not defeated, but beginning to rise again. My steps carry me further into the quiet city until I find myself standing before the remains of a church. Once, it must have been a proud structure, its spire lifting toward the heavens, its bells calling the faithful to gather. Now, its roof is caved in, the windows shattered, and its great wooden doors scorched and broken. Yet even in ruin, it feels sacred. The walls, blackened though they are, seem to hold not only the memory of worship, but the enduring weight of faith. I step inside slowly, as though entering hallowed ground. Ash crunches softly beneath my boots, and sunlight filters through gaps in the roof, falling in shafts that illuminate the silence. The pews are nothing but charred fragments, scattered like bones across the floor. But at the far end, The altar still stands, scarred by flame, but upright, steady, resolute. In its presence, I feel a stillness that the fire could not consume. I pause there, letting the quiet settle around me. For a long while, I do not move, only breathe. My eyes trace the shadows across the ruined walls, where faint outlines of crosses remain, etched in smoke and memory. I imagine the voices that once filled this space, hymns rising together, prayers whispered in unison, sermons delivered with conviction. All of that sound has been silenced by fire, but somehow its echo lingers. The fire took wood and stone, but it did not take what the people carried in their hearts. Faith does not burn. As I stand there, I find myself bowing my head, not in ritual, but in quiet reflection. I do not speak aloud, yet in the stillness, my thoughts form into prayer, not for myself, but for the city, for the families scattered and the lives disrupted, for strength to rebuild, for comfort in grief, for hope to endure when everything feels lost. Leaving the church, I walk a short distance to the cemetery nearby. Here, too, the fire left its marks. Some headstones are blackened, others toppled, and the iron gates are twisted by heat, but the earth itself remains undisturbed, the names carved in stone still visible, still speaking across time. I wander among the graves, tracing the names with my eyes. Soldiers, children, mothers, fathers. Each stone is a reminder that the story of Richmond is not just about battles and politics, but about lives lived, loved, and mourned. The cemetery is quiet, but not empty. It is full of memory, and in that memory, a kind of endurance. I stop at one stone, its inscription half worn by time and now darkened by smoke. I brush the ash from its surface, revealing the carved words beneath. I read them silently, then stand in stillness for a while. Here, in this place of rest, I feel the weight of history, but also its continuity. The fire has not silenced these voices. They remain, speaking softly through stone and soil, reminding me that faith and remembrance are stronger than destruction. As I walk on, I notice something small but powerful. A single flower, growing near the edge of a grave. Its petals are pale, its stem thin, but it stands tall amid the gray earth and ashes. It seems almost impossible, yet there it is, a sign that life persists, even here. I pause, kneeling slightly to look closer. The flower leans gently in the breeze, a fragile yet radiant testimony to survival. Faith, I realize, is much the same. It bends in hardship, but it does not vanish. It flickers in the darkest nights, but it does not go out. For the people of Richmond, faith will be the foundation on which they build again. Not only the faith of religion, but the faith of endurance, of community, of hope that tomorrow can be brighter than today. As the light begins to fade, I leave the cemetery behind. My walk through these sacred places has not been heavy, though the ruins are sorrowful. Instead, it has been grounding, like standing on a bedrock that cannot be shaken. The church may be burned, the graves may be blackened, but faith remains. It lives in the hearts of the people, in the prayers whispered in silence, in the determination to rise again. And as I continue on, I carry that faith with me, the quiet strength of something lasting, something unbroken by fire. The day has stretched long, and as I continue my walk, I notice the light beginning to change. The sharp glare of afternoon has softened into gold, and the shadows lengthen across the ruined streets. Evening draws its curtain gently over the city, as if even the sky wishes to offer Richmond some quiet rest. I pause on a corner where two wide avenues meet. These streets, once filled with wagons and voices, are now hushed, the air still carrying the faint tang of smoke. Yet here and there, I see signs of life stirring as the night begins. In the windows of houses that survived the flames, lanterns are being lit. Their glow is faint at first, just a soft glimmer in the dusk. But as more appear, they scatter points of warmth across the darkened city. I watch as one flame flickers, steadying itself against the wind. Its glow spills out onto the street, falling across rubble and ash, and for a moment the ruin is softened, held in a tender light. One lantern, then another and another, each a reminder that even after devastation, people still seek warmth, still carve out small circles of comfort in the dark. As I walk further, the soundscape of the city shifts again. The heavy silence of the afternoon gives way to the evening's quieter voices. Somewhere, crickets begin their song, their steady rhythm filling the air like a low hum. I hear the faint clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversation behind closed doors, and the occasional bark of a dog. These are not the sounds of a bustling city as it once was, but they are sounds of life, gentle, fragile, yet real. I turn toward the river once more. The James flows calmly, its surface touched with the last streaks of twilight. The water reflects the sky, carrying with it a mixture of soft blues and fading orange. It seems unchanged, unshaken by the fire, as though reminding the city of a steadiness deeper than ruin. Standing by its banks, I take a deep breath. The smell of ash still lingers, but beneath it, I catch the fresher scent of water and evening air. Looking back at Richmond, I see the outlines of its buildings, some whole, many broken, all cast in the deepening shadow of night. The jagged ruins, which by daylight seemed sharp and cruel, now appear softened beneath twilight's gentle veil. Darkness, in its quiet mercy, covers what the sun revealed too harshly. The fractured walls, the blackened timbers, the scars etched into stone, all of it fades into silhouette, less harsh, less jagged, and in that dimness, the lanterns shine all the brighter. Their faint glows, scattered across the streets and windows, remind me of fireflies dotting the summer air, small points of light moving against the vastness of dark. Each glow feels like a heartbeat, quiet, steady, almost fragile, yet persistent. They flicker with the promise of endurance, of life carrying on even when all else has fallen silent. I linger for a moment, letting my eyes adjust, letting the lanterns guide my thoughts. A city can feel like a living thing, and Richmond, though scarred, still breathes. Its breath is slower now, heavy with exhaustion, yet it breathes all the same. My thoughts drift back over the path I've walked today. I think of the hollow streets where voices once echoed, now left to silence. I think of the proud government halls, their walls burned hollow, their power dissolved into ash. I think of the river, calm and steady, carrying on as though nothing had touched it. I think of the homes left empty, of chimneys standing lonely against the sky. And beyond the ruins, I remember the small signs of survival, the townsfolk bent to their labor, the laughter of children playing where the fire had passed, the soft humming of a woman tending her small garden. I think, too, of the sacred places, of the ruined church where faith still lingered like smoke in the rafters, where silence itself became a kind of prayer, and of the cemetery where flowers bloomed quietly beside stones darkened by soot, fragile, blooming, enduring. It is these small images that stay with me as night deepens. The fire has scarred this city, but it has not silenced it. Each faint lantern, each soft voice carried on the breeze, each sound of a hammer striking against wood is a reminder that life returns, slowly, patiently, quietly. As I continue walking, I notice how the night itself seems to join in this sense of recovery. The crickets sing their chorus, steady and rhythmic, weaving a soft hymn into the air. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then settles into silence again. My own footsteps echo lightly on the cobblestones, but for the first time all day, they do not feel lonely. Instead, they feel accompanied, as though the city itself is walking with me, its endurance steadying my pace. The silence is still here, but it is no longer the silence of absence. It is a different kind of quiet now. It is the quiet of endurance, of a city resting after trial, of people gathering strength for the long days ahead. It is the silence of a deep breath taken before beginning again. At the edge of the street, I stop and turn for one last look. Richmond lies behind me, its skyline jagged but softened by the night. The ruins are not hidden, but neither do they dominate. What stands out now are the lights. Lanterns glowing in windows, warm circles of brightness along the streets. They shine not in spite of the ruins, but because of them, like stars against the dark backdrop of sky. And I realize in this moment that Richmond's story is not finished. It is only changing. Fire has left its mark, deep and undeniable, but so too will the courage of those who remain. The city will be written again, piece by piece, brick by brick, lantern by lantern, faith by faith. The crickets continue their evening song. The James River, just beyond my sight, carries the reflection of the moon, flowing onward as it always has. Somewhere, behind those glowing windows, families share quiet meals, voices lowered not by despair, but by fatigue. Tomorrow, they will wake, and the work will begin again. I draw in one last breath of the night air. It is cool, heavy still, with a trace of smoke, but calmer now, less biting. In it, I sense both the memory of what has been lost and the quiet promise of what might yet be built. And with that breath, I carry with me the image of this city at twilight. Richmond, humbled but not broken. Scarred but not undone. A city wounded, yes, but enduring. Its ruins softened by night, its lights glowing like quiet vows to the future. As I turn to leave, I let the sound of the evening stay with me. The crickets, the faint hum of voices, the river's endless current. Together, they form a lullaby, a song of survival, a promise that even in the ashes, life continues. And so, Richmond remains in memory, a city of ruins, of shadows, of lanterns, and of quiet, steadfast endurance. And so, our quiet walk through the wounded and rebuilding worlds of Richmond comes to a gentle close. The echoes of history, the whispers of new ideas, and the profound beauty of a city in transition now fade into the stillness of the night. Rest easy. The rabbit hole of time holds many more slow steps. Until we meet again, Silas is signing off.